David Letterman's coffee cup slipped from his hand and shattered on the studio floor. Paul Schaefer's fingers froze on the piano key. The band stopped mid-note. 200 people in Studio 6A stopped breathing. Sitting across from Dave was Muhammad Ali the Greatest, the three-time heavyweight champion of the world, the man who'd faced down George Foreman in the jungle and the U.S. government in court. And right now, on this March night in 1984, his hands were shaking uncontrollably. His legendary voice, the voice that had declared, "I am the greatest," was barely a whisper. Something was terribly wrong. And in the next 90 seconds, Ali would reveal a secret that would shatter everything America thought they knew about invincibility. March 22nd, 1984. Studio 6A, Rockefeller Center, New York City. Late Night with David Letterman was hitting its stride in the ratings. The show had found its voice irreverent, smart, unpredictable. Dave, at 37, was the young rebel of late-night television, the guy who dropped watermelons off buildings and wore Alka-Seltzer suits into giant tanks of water. He made Johnny Carson look ancient. He made traditional television look boring. The wood-paneled studio glowed under tungsten light. The familiar desk sat center stage, that retro throwback to an earlier era of broadcast. Paul Schaefer's keyboard gleamed under a spotlight. The New York skyline sparkled through the tall windows behind them. Everything was exactly as it should be on a Thursday night in Midtown Manhattan. David Letterman sat behind his desk, his curly brown hair perfectly imperfect, his tie slightly loosened, his gap-toothed grin ready to deploy at a moment's notice. He shuffled his blue index cards, the famous card that held his joke, his question, his safety net. Paul sat at his keyboard, fingers ready to punctuate every punch. The studio audience, 200 strong, buzzed with anticipation. Tonight's guest was supposed to be a home run, a ratings bonanza, a legend, Muhammad Ali. The booking had taken 8 months. Ali didn't do a lot of television anymore. At 42, he'd been retired from boxing for 3 years. His last fight had been a disaster, a loss to Trevor Berbick in the Bahamas, a sad coda to the greatest career in boxing history. The papers had been brutal. The greatest grows old. Ali's painful exit. Time catches everyone. But Ali was still Ali. Still the most recognizable face on planet Earth. Still the man who'd changed sport, changed culture, changed everything. The man who'd refused to go to Vietnam and said, "No Viet Cong ever called me nigger." The man who'd beaten Sonny Liston, Joe Frazier 3 times, and George Foreman in the Rumble in the Jungle. The man who'd turned boxing into poetry and made the world pay attention. Dave's producers had warned, "Keep it light. Ali loves to perform. Let him do his magic trick. He always carries a few. Let him recite his poem. Let him be the greatest. Don't ask about Vietnam. Don't ask about the wars with Frazier. Don't ask about his health." There'd been rumor, whispers that something wasn't right, but Ali's people had shut down every inquiry. The monologue went perfect. Dave killed. The audience loved. Paul's band was tight. Everything was clicked. And then came the moment. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dave said, that Midwestern earnestness creeping into his voice despite his best efforts to sound cool. "Our next guest, without exaggeration, the most famous athlete in the history of the world. He's a 3-time heavyweight champ, an Olympic gold medalist, a poet, an activist, and the only man who ever made George Foreman look slow." The audience erupted. "He's been called the greatest so many times that it's actually now part of his legal name. Please welcome Muhammad Ali." Paul's band launched in "Stand By Me," Ali's favorite song. The curtain pulled back, and Muhammad Ali walked out. The audience went insane. Standing ovation, people screaming, flashbulbs popped. This was royal. This was history walking onto a talk show set. But something was off. Ali walked slow, very slow. His movement, once fluid as water, now seemed heavy, deliberate. His face, that beautiful face that had been on the cover of Sports Illustrated more time than anyone could count, looked puffed, slightly vacant. His eyes, those eyes that had stared down Sonny Liston and made him quit on his stool, seemed distant. Dave stood to shake his hand, and when their hands met, Dave felt something that made his stomach drop. Ali's hand was shaking, not nervous, uncontrollable. Dave covered well. He smiled big, gestured for Ali to sit, kept the energy up. The audience was still applauding. Nobody else seemed to notice, or maybe they noticed and didn't want to believe it. Ali sat in the guest chair. He wore a black suit with a white shirt, no tie, his signature style. He smiled at the audience, raised his fist slowly, the iconic gesture, and the place exploded again. "Champ," Dave said, sitting back down behind his desk. "It's an honor to have you here." Ali's voice, when he spoke, was quiet, soft, nothing like the booming instrument that had once filled Madison Square Garden, that had trash-talked its way into his. "Happy to be here, David." Dave's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second. Paul glanced over from his keyboard, concern flickering across his face. "So, champ, I gotta ask, you're the only 3-time heavyweight champion in his. How does that feel? What's that like?" Ali paused, longer than he should have. His mouth moved slightly, like he was trying to form words. Then, "Feels good, real good." The audience applauded, but there was uncertainty in it now. Something wasn't right. Dave pushed forward, doing what hosts do, filling space, keeping energy up, pretending everything was normal. I heard you still do magic tricks. Is that true? Can you show us something? Ali's face brightened slightly. Magic was his thing. He'd been doing tricks since he was a kid in Louisville, pulling coins from behind children's ears, making handkerchiefs disappear. It was his way of connecting, of making people smile. Sure, Ali said. His hands went to his jacket pocket. They trembled as he pulled out a red handkerchief. The audience watched rapt. Ali held the handkerchief up, his hand shaking visibly now. He tried to ball it up in his fist, the classic setup for the disappearing handkerchief trick, but his fingers wouldn't cooperate. The handkerchief slipped, fell to the floor. Ali looked down then at his hand, then at Dave, and for the first time in his life, Muhammad Ali looked lost. The studio fell silent, not the good silence, the terrible silence. Dave stood up without thinking. Here, champ. Let me. No, Ali said, his voice barely audible. No, I got it. He bent down slowly, painfully, and picked up the handkerchief. The audience watched in horrified silence as the greatest athlete in the world struggled with a piece of cloth. When Ali straightened back up, his face was stiff. The mask was gone. The showman had left the building. What remained was a 42-year-old man whose body was betraying him. Dave sat back down, his mind raced. This was live television. 2 million people were watching. He could cut to commercial. He could make a joke. He could save this. But something in Ali's eyes stopped. Champ, Dave said quietly, all the comedy gone from his voice. Are you okay? What Ali said next would stop the heart of everyone watching. The silence in Studio 6A was absolute. You could hear the hum of the light, the distant sound of traffic from Rockefeller Plaza, someone's nervous breath. Muhammad Ali looked at David Letterman. Then he looked at the audience, then at the camera, directly into the lens, directly at America. No, he said simply. I'm not okay. Paul Schaefer's hand slowly lifted off the keyboard. The band members behind him sat froze, instruments still. I'm sick, David. Ali continued, his words slow, deliberate, like each one cost him something. Have been for a while now. They tell me it's from getting hit in the head 10,000 times. They got a name for it. Parkinson's disease. The audience gasped, actually gasped, like the air had been sucked out of the room. Dave's face went white. This wasn't in the pre-interview. This wasn't approved. This was Muhammad Ali, live on national television, telling the world he was dying. My hand shakes, Ali said, holding them up for everyone to see. They trembled like leaves in a storm. Can't control them. My speech is going. My balance. The doctors say it's going to get worse. A woman in the front row started crying. Champ, Dave said, his voice cracking. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. If I'd known, I wouldn't have asked you. It's okay. Ali interrupted. People need to know. I need to say it out loud, where everyone can hear. Dave didn't know what to do. Every instinct as a host told him to cut to commercial, to save Ali from this moment, to protect, but something deeper told him to shut up and listen. You know what the worst part is? Ali asked, not really expecting an answer. It ain't the shake. It ain't even losing my voice. It's that people look at me now, and they see weakness. They see a broken man. And I spent my whole life trying to be strong. He paused, struggling to get the next words out. I was the greatest, David. I told everyone. I believed. I made the world believe. And now look at me. Can't even make a handkerchief disappear. A sob escaped from somewhere in the audience. Then another. The whole studio was crying now. Dave felt his own eyes burn. He looked at Paul. Paul was staring at the floor, his jaw clenched tight. And then Dave did something that would be talked about for the next 40 years. He stood up from behind his desk, walked around it, walked past the guest chair, and sat down on the floor, right there, on the stage floor, cross-legged, like a kid. The cameras scrambled to adjust. The director in the booth was screaming into headset, but the cameras kept rolling because nobody had the guts to cut away from his position on the floor. Dave looked up at Ali. Champ, Dave said, can I tell you something? Ali nodded slowly. I'm 37 years old. I've been on television for 10 years, and every single night, before I walk out on that stage, I'm terrified. Terrified I'm not funny enough, not smart enough, not good enough. I fake it every night. I pretend to be confident, but inside, I'm scared to death. Dave's voice was shaking. You changed my life, champ. When I was a kid in Indianapolis, watching you fight on TV, watching you stand up to the government, watching you refuse to be what they wanted you to be, you taught me that it's okay to be yourself. That strength isn't about never being afraid. It's about being afraid and doing it anyway. Ali was crying now, real tears streaming down that famous face. So if you think showing weakness makes you less of a man, Dave continued, you're wrong. This right now, this is the bravest thing I've ever seen anyone do. Telling the truth. Being vulnerable. That's strength, champ. That's real strength. And then Ali said 7 words that would haunt Dave Letterman forever. Muhammad Ali reached down with his shaking hand and touched Dave's shoulder. Thank you, he whispered. I needed to hear that. They stayed like that for a moment. Dave on the floor, Ali in the chair. 2 men from completely different worlds, connected by something neither of them could name. Paul Schaefer, tears streaming down his face, began to play. Softly, so softly you almost couldn't hear it at first. It was Stand By Me, again, but this time played like a prayer for broken things. The audience sat in stunned silence. This wasn't entertainment. This was witness. This was church. Dave slowly stood up. He helped Ollie to his. Ollie stood, unsteady, but standing. And then Ollie did something no one expected. He started to dance. Not the Ollie shuffle. Not the fancy footwork that had made him famous. Just a slow, gentle sway to Paul's music. His feet barely moving. His body trim, but dancing. "This is how I fight now," Ollie said, his voice stronger somehow. "Not with my fist. Not in a ring. I fight by showing up. By being here. By letting people see that even champions fall down, but we get back up." The audience exploded. Not polite applause. Not entertainment industry applause. Real applause. The kind that comes from the soul. People were standing, crying, clapping, some of them just standing there with their hands over their heart. Dave stood next to Ollie, and they swayed together to Paul's music. The host and the champ, the comedian and the fighter, both of them broken in their own way, both of them brave enough to admit it. "We're going to take a break," Dave finally said to the camera. "We'll be right back." But they didn't come back. Not really. What happened during that commercial break would change everything. The cameras cut. The red light went off. The audience stayed seated, nobody wanting to break the spell. Ollie sat back down, exhausted. A production assistant brought him water. His hand shook so badly he could barely hold the glass. Dave knelt beside his chair. "Champ, I'm sorry. I didn't mean." "Don't apologize," Ollie said. "This is what I came here to do. I just didn't know it until it happened." Dave's producers were in his ear through his hidden earpiece, telling him to cut the interview short, to go to a pre-taped segment to save this show. Dave pulled the earpiece out and dropped it on the floor. "How long have you known?" Dave asked quietly. 3 years, Ollie admitted. "Since right after my last fight. The doctors told me then. But I wouldn't accept it. I'm Muhammad Ali. I don't get sick. I don't get weak." "Does your family know?" Ollie nodded. "My wife, my kids, they've been watching me disappear for 3 years. Watching me pretend everything's fine. Tonight's the first time I've admitted it to anyone outside my house." Dave looked at this man, this icon, this god among men, and saw something he'd never expected to see. Humanity. "Why tonight?" Dave asked. "Because I'm tired of lying," Ollie said. "If I'm finally telling the truth, I might as well tell it to 2 million people at once." A silence settled over the studio. Then Ollie leaned in and whispered 7 words the microphones didn't catch. "I'm scared of what's coming next." Dave felt his throat close. Muhammad Ali, the man who'd stared down Liz, survived Frazier, conquered Foreman, was scared. "Champ," Dave said, "you've faced the scariest guys on earth, but I can't win this," Ollie replied. "That's what scares me." The stage manager begged them to continue the show, but Dave paused. "Champ, do you want to keep going?" Ollie nodded. "People need to see this. All of it." When they came back from commercial, Dave didn't return to his desk. He sat beside Ollie like a friend. For the next 20 minutes, Dave told the camera, "We're just going to talk." Ollie spoke about Louisville, Malcolm X, refusing the draft, losing everything, gaining it back, and then about losing himself piece by piece. "The hardest thing," he said, "is watching my kids realize I'm not invincible anymore. Some days, I can't even button my shirt." Dave wiped his eyes. "So did half the studio. But real strength," Ollie continued, "is getting up even when you don't want, asking for help, letting people see. Love gets you through, not strength." The studio was silent except for quiet crying. "Champ," Dave whispered, "thank you for being honest. Thank you for letting," Ollie said. He stood carefully, waved that iconic wave, and left the stage. Dave watched him go, then turned to the camera. "Ladies and gentlemen, Muhammad Ali." The applause lasted 5 minutes. Dave led it. When it ended, he said something he'd never said on TV. "Go home. Hug someone you love. Remember what you saw tonight." NBC executives hated the episode. "Too depressing," they said. They buried no rerun, no special. But VHS tape existed, and the episode spread everywhere. It became legend. Ali's Parkinson's worsened, just as he'd predicted. His speech faded. His body failed. But he never hid. He appeared publicly, hands shaking, letting the world see the truth he had shown on Letterman. In 1996, at the Olympics, a trembling Ali lit the torch before 1 billion people. And millions remembered that night in 1984, when he admitted fear for the first time. Dave watched from his CBS dressing. When Ali died in 2016, Dave was asked what he'd remember. "March 22nd, 1984, he said. "The night he taught me vulnerability is strength. The night he saved my life." "Saved your life?" "I was hiding behind jokes," Dave said. "He showed me I didn't have to." What Dave didn't mention publicly was that they stayed in touch for decades. The calls grew shorter as Ali's speech deteriorated. Their last call was in 2014. Ali couldn't talk, but Dave asked to say something anyway. "Champ, thank you. Changed my life. Before. He broke down. Then, from the other end, barely audible, "Thank you, David. You too." Ali's last words. At a memorial in Louisville, Dave told the whole story. Then he pulled out a red handkerchief. "The champ mailed me this after that night. No, just this, the one he dropped on stage. I've kept it for 32 years. Whenever I'm scared, I look at it and remember the strongest man alive wasn't afraid to be human." Dave's voice cracked as he folded. "We all try to be invincible, but we're all fragile. We're all scared. And the only way through is honest love and courage. The crowd stood, applauding. Dave looked not at but at a young photo of Ali, beautiful, powerful, undefeated. Except he was never invincible. None of us are. That's the point. That night wasn't about ratings or spectacle. It was about truth. About two men removing their mask. About pain shared instead of hidden. NBC never released the episode, but bootleg copies circulate in film schools and journalism classes. It has become the gold standard for what television can be when it stops entertaining and starts telling the truth. And somewhere in Dave's desk drawer in Montana sits that red handkerchief, a reminder that Muhammad Ali was the greatest not because he never broke, but because he was brave enough to be broke. Real strength isn't the absence of fear. It's showing up anyway, shaking hands and all.